A doctor humiliated an autistic boy. Days later, he begged to save his own son. He was sure control was a synonym for cure until the day he lost control of his own son. On a morning shift, Dr. Richard Miller, a vascular surgeon known for cutting through doubt with the same cold precision he used on calcified arteries, crossed the hallway of the pediatric ward and saw a boy with big headphones, eyes on the floor, a Rubik's Cube in his hands. The boy, Gabe, was waiting for an appointment with the occupational therapist. When his mother asked a simple favor, "Doctor, he gets nervous with noise. Could you speak softly?" Richard smiled without his eyes and answered loudly for everyone to hear. "If he wants to live in a silent world, life will only scream louder. You need to stop babying him." A dense silence followed, broken by the cube hitting the floor. Gabe's face tightened, his body folded in, and he pressed himself against the wall, hands shaking. Some staff looked at the doctor with quiet disapproval. Others pretended not to see. Richard moved on, hurrying the mother along with a curt gesture. In that moment, without knowing, he planted a wound that would return as evidence and as sentence. That afternoon, during a team meeting, a psychologist tried to warn him gently. "Richard, communication is a procedure too." He shot back dry. "When communication saves a leg, I'll chart it." A resident gave an awkward laugh. The coordinator ended the meeting when she felt the temperature drop, and Richard tapped his pen on the table 3 times, his ritual before any decision. 1, 2, 3. Everything needed to fit inside those 3 beats. Order, rule, will. In the parking lot, late at night, he got an audio message from his 12-year-old son, Tyler. "Dad, are you coming to the game? I'm starting today." Richard listened with the key already half-turned in the ignition, eyes on the clock, mind on a report he had to send. He tapped the pen against his leg. 1, 2, 3, and recorded, "Son, life is competition. You'll have lots of games. I'm going to miss this one. Send." Only afterward did the contradiction register. He'd spent years saying life was competition, yet he was skipping the first game where his son had won a starting slot. He didn't think it through. He shifted into gear and drove away. 2 weeks later, a scream of metal-tearing air woke half the city. A truck driver dozed off on the main avenue, ran the light, and hit Tyler's school bus. The news arrived like glass that cracks in silence and then suddenly shatters. Richard tore through corridors that smelled of povidone iodine and stretcher tires, but this time he was the one sweating cold, working a new hand ritual. 1, 2, 3 presses to the pocket where he kept his phone. Now the phone was the thread tying him to any certainty. He found Tyler in a trauma room, breathing but unresponsive, pupils reactive, reflexes intact, but no words. The attending physician said that besides the physical trauma, there had been a strong sensory overload. He's in a shutdown state, maybe from pain, maybe from the noise, maybe from panic dissociation. Has he been sensitive to sound? Richard frowned. Tyler always loved stadiums, loud music, video games. "No," he said, trying to stamp a period on a question that opened doors he didn't want to walk through. At night, sitting on the floor of the observation room, Richard saw Tyler flinch at the persistent beep of the monitor. With trembling fingers, he disconnected the alarm, dimmed the light, closed the curtain. Tyler relaxed by millimeters. The doctor looked around for something to hold on to and found, on the bedside table, a Rubik's Cube. It wasn't Tyler's. Maybe a volunteer had left it. He picked it up, felt the click of the turning pieces like micro-rulers straightening the world. A nurse came in on quiet feet. "If the noise bothers him, we have headphones in the supply room." Richard nodded. The cube in his hands made the hospital feel, for a second, less hostile. And then he heard a murmur in the hallway, the occupational therapist speaking to a mother. "We can try desensitization slowly. And of course, ask everyone to speak softly without irony." The word irony slipped through the curtain and struck him. Without seeing, he knew who they meant. A concrete weight settled. Not abstract guilt, but the memory of Gabe's cube hitting the floor. Dawn pulled on the day with a gray thread. Tyler woke in his own way, wordless, fixating on a point on the wall, then turning away when he heard heavy footsteps. Richard lowered his voice, took off the watch that chimed every hour, and put it away. In minutes, he learned what he'd rejected for years. Sensitivity wasn't weakness, it was clinical data. At noon, the psychologist he'd brushed off returned, voice low. "We can bring someone from the team who knows more about sensory integration." He drew his first easy breath in hours. "Please." And when the door opened, in walked a familiar face. the same occupational therapist he had ignored in the hallway on Cube Day. Behind her, hand in hand with his mother, came Gabe. He held a well-worn cube and a laminated card with pictograms. Their eyes met. The cube Richard had been turning stopped mid-twist. The therapist spoke softly. "Dr. Miller, Gabe knows this hospital better than most. He can tell when a sound is about to make things worse. If you'll allow it, he can show us what helps." Richard felt the word "allow" bend his pride down to the floor. The world he believed he could control had jumped the tracks. And the question appeared whole, like a scalpel flashing under the OR lights. If the person you scorned were the only one who could help the person you love, would you have the courage to apologize and listen? Richard agreed with a nod that wasn't the automatic arm of a boss, but the arm of a father who didn't know where to start. Silent, Gabe approached slowly, like someone coming up to a window in a draft. He set the pictogram card on the table. Simple figures for low light, low noise and break. Gabe's mother, Mrs. Rose, kept a respectful distance, like someone holding the string of a kite she can't let snap. The therapist, Camille, said, "Tyler may be overloaded. Let's try headphones, reduce stimuli, and offer a predictable routine. Gabe, can you show us how we do it?" The boy nodded, and with a practiced gesture, pointed to the lamp, then the monitor. Richard dimmed the lights and silenced non-critical alarms. The spaced-out beeps turned into a whisper. Tyler unclenched his jaw. From there, hours slipped by. Richard stopped being the doctor who orchestrates teams to become the dad who learns protocols. In the mental whiteboard where he hung results, a new section appeared, handwritten, "Test, observe, adjust." When late hunger hit, he stepped into the hallway and bought a water, 2 bars, and a packet of plain crackers. Coming back, he saw Gabe leaned against the wall, cube in hand. Mrs. Rose waited in a plastic chair. Richard cleared his throat and his voice emerged softer than he expected. "I'm sorry for that time." Not a speech, a sentence that touched down without shattering. Gabe turned the cube. 2 twists, a pause, 1 twist. Then he raised the card and pointed to "Speak softly." Richard smiled at the corner of his mouth. "Okay, soft." Mrs. Rose exhaled like someone setting down a weight and picking up another. "You don't know how much that day hurt. But today," she looked toward Tyler, beyond the cracked door. "Today, we're thinking about the boy." Camille nodded, and with the ease of someone stitching invisible seams, asked, "Gabe, can you show us the signs you noticed before a meltdown?" He started listing them with his fingers. Wordless, squeezing his eyes shut, fidgeting without rhythm, quick head turns, shoulders tightening. They were signs Richard now knew out of necessity, but never out of respect. He scribbled notes, misspelled overload as overload, crossed it out, rewrote it. The man who used to red pen everyone else's reports was learning how to be a student. That afternoon, the hospital coordinator, Julia, called Richard to her office. There was a formal complaint on record. Disrespectful conduct toward a patient with ASD, dated 2 weeks prior. Proof came as a simple letter, signed by 2 nursing techs, describing what happened in the hallway and quoting the word "babying." The word, black, centered, whole, looked like a blade. Julia didn't raise her voice. "We need to address this ethically and pedagogically. There'll be a written warning and mandatory training." Richard held the letter. He didn't argue. "I accept." She watched him. No varnish of self-protection, no sprint to justify. "And how is your son?" He breathed, and it was the first time in a while anyone at the hospital asked about Tyler, not his imaging results. "Sensitive, but better when we reduce stimulus." Julia pressed her lips together. "If you need flexibility on your schedule, we'll make room." The hospital, which had always been a machine to him, extended a hand. Back at the bedside, a new tension. A physical therapist came in talking loudly, cracking a joke about last night's game, and Tyler's face went rigid. His left hand started to tremble. Before the wave crested, Gabe raised the quiet card and pointed at the door. Richard, off script, asked, "Could you keep it down, please?" The physical therapist didn't like it. "This isn't a church." Mrs. Rose lifted her chin. "It's a hospital." The air turned to a knife on the table. The therapist left, irritated, and a seed was planted for a bigger conflict. Staff who didn't think these sensitivities should dictate the floor. The tension had a date and time to return. That night, Tyler made eye contact for 2 seconds and rested his forehead on his father's arm. Richard hadn't cried in years, not from hardness but from belief. Tears blur the sights. Now his eyes burned, and still he saw better. He leaned his head on the cold wall and for the first time kept quiet on purpose. Silence became respect. Beside him, Gabe turned his cube until all 6 faces aligned, a victory displayed without trumpets. He set the cube next to the pictogram card, aligned both with the corner of the table, and nudged them forward a centimeter as if to say, "Your turn." Richard understood. He turned to his son, adjusted the headphones and murmured a sequence Camille taught him. "Breathe with me. 4 in, hold for 4, out for 4. Tyler's chest matched the count, full to the brim, then emptying. Small rituals took on the weight of bridges. The turning point when it came didn't bring sirens, it brought a brown envelope. 2 days later, a social worker handed Richard a document he'd avoided for months, Tyler's school report, filed by the boy's mother, Lauren, with whom Richard maintained a truce of short messages and child support transfers. The report mentioned auditory processing difficulties, hypersensitivity to sudden sounds, sensory regulation strategies that work. It gave examples: headphones during tests, breaks in quieter spaces, avoid the PE teacher's whistle. At the end, a recommendation: refer for evaluation by an interdisciplinary team. The paper was dated 8 months earlier. Below, in Lauren's handwriting, "Richard, can we talk?" He never replied. His error had material form now, not theory, not opinion. Firm lines, the school stamp, the coordinator's signature, and the concrete request he'd ignored. The moral ground shifted under Richard's feet. Omission had shape: the crease of the envelope, the slightly crumpled page, the blue ink of a familiar hand. He closed his eyes and replayed the audio he'd sent his son on game day. "You'll have lots of games. I'm going to miss this one." And understood it wasn't just a lost game, it was a way of losing. He breathed deep. 4 in, 4 holding, 4 out. He opened the door, found Lauren in the hallway. Her hair was tied up any which way, dark circles coiled under her eyes, posture of someone who'd been on her feet all day. "I should have read it earlier," he managed. She clenched her fists inside her pockets. "I needed you to read it earlier." No shouting. Something worse, plain truth. Camille appeared with a hardcover notebook. "Let's build a routine plan with Tyler." She opened it, and with post-its drew out the day: med schedules, rest windows, overload signs. Things that help, things that don't. Gabe stepped closer and put a star sticker over headphones. Clear message: "This helps." Richard saw in that notebook something he recognized from the OR. Protocol saves lives, not by locking you in, but by letting you decide quickly when time is the blade. The decisive push was this: a forgotten document and the right eyes to turn it into change. In the next few days, Tyler began signaling with tiny gestures. He touched the headphone ear cup when something bothered him. He squeezed his right fist when he needed a break. He lined up crackers on the hospital tray. 1, 2, 3, and only then 8. Richard started aligning things with him, learning a dance with no music but with rhythm. With each gesture, a border redrew. The dad who used to say, "Life won't ask your permission," was now teaching the world how to ask his son's permission. Just as the ground seemed to settle, outside pressure seeped through the door with charts in hand. The hospital leadership, responding to the complaint, called a broader meeting on accessibility and communication with neurodivergent patients. Some staff welcomed it, others thought it was overkill. The loud physical therapist grumbled in the break room. "So now, a patient runs the show." A tech answered, "It's not running the show, it's care." The debate grew like a crack in a wall. You pretend it's a patina until the hammer hits. Meanwhile, the truck driver's father, a businessman with money and lawyers, tried to pin blame on the school, turning the story into hallway chatter. They're going to blame the school. Lauren got a journalist's call asking for comment. Richard, who always lived above PR headaches, felt the panic of his son's pain becoming opinion. Julia, the coordinator, was direct. "If reporters reach out, I can mediate, but silence is best for now." Silence had become a strategy. Imagine that. Back in the room, Gabe brought a gift, a silicone bracelet with an ear pictogram and the word "low." "To wear when you need it," Camille said. "Some families use it to signal environmental preference." Richard slipped it on. It felt odd, almost childish, but when a team wheeled in a new talking infusion pump, he raised his arm and pointed to the bracelet. "Can we mute the non-critical beeps?" No one argued. The bracelet worked better than an order. That night, while Tyler slept and Lauren dozed in the chair, Richard opened the brown envelope again and ran his fingers over Lauren's signature. He traced the word "talk" as if it had texture. He felt the world rearranging. The first big win came at a cost, like most things that matter. On Tuesday morning, Tyler said his first word since the accident. It wasn't dad, not mum, not hurt. It was low. He looked at the lamp and said low, in the thick voice of someone rising from deep water. Richard, who'd learned to hold his movements so as not to startle, kept his body calm, but his eyes smiled on the edge of tears. He squeezed his son's hand, slow, low. We'll keep it low. He dimmed the light, adjusted the monitor, lowered the blind. Tyler breathed. Lauren woke and covered her mouth as if catching a bird trying to fly out of her throat. He spoke. It meant little to a medical bulletin, but it was a world returned. The price came fast. That same physical therapist came in with a tablet of exercises and insisted on a series with background music to motivate him. Tyler went rigid, and low became no, then turned into silent tears, the worst kind for a father who'd always thought crying was noisy. Richard asked him to pause the music. The therapist rolled his eyes. No stimulus, no progress. Camille stepped in. Right stimulus, right progress. The man grumbled. The mood soured. A victory of one word had become a tug of war over method. Still held up by the fragile threads of what had worked, Richard realized that battle wasn't only about Tyler's comfort, it was about culture change. That day, the formal warning over the incident with Gabe hit the hospital system, a dry, impersonal notification, as compliance machines prefer. Some colleagues sent genuine support, others sent bureaucratic support. One wrote, "This is a witch hunt." Richard didn't reply. He knew the warning was fair, and to fight it would be asking the world to keep letting him off the hook. He signed it. In Julia's office, he asked for one thing. "I want to deliver the training to my team, but not now. With Camille. When Tyler's discharged, I'll do it." Julia weighed him with her eyes and saw a plain honesty there. "It'll matter, and it'll be hard." That night, Lauren, exhausted, asked under her breath, "Do you think other families need to hear this?" Richard looked at the pictogram card. "I think, if someone out there is loving a person who's sensitive to the world, they should breathe with them. Lower the lights. Silence whatever alarm you can. It doesn't fix everything, but it opens a door, not a pamphlet. A gesture of sharing." He understood that sometimes in the middle of a story, people outside need to feel invited to adjust the world around the person they love. In the hallway, Gabe left a small discovery only the attentive would notice. A drawing. On a piece of paper folded in half, he drew a bed, a dim lamp, big headphones on a stick figure head, and a Rubik's Cube with all 6 faces solved. Underneath, in spaced letters, "OK." He slipped it under the cube on Tyler's bedside table, the corner begging to be aligned. Richard found the drawing when he came back from the bathroom. "OK" wasn't small, it was a license. He aligned the paper with the cube, ritualizing the thank you he didn't yet know how to say. Then, with the pen he used to tap 3 times, he wrote on the back, "I'm sorry." He signed not Dr. Richard, but Richard. He put the paper back in the same precise place. The days ahead put their gains to the test. Tyler started sensory-informed physical therapy with another clinician, Caroline, who knew that progress isn't only range of motion, it's range of safety. Each session brought a small win. Sitting 5 minutes without headphones, walking 2 halls with low light, tolerating a hand on his shoulders for 3 seconds. He spoke with short words, break, water, more, and long, steady looks. Richard celebrated without fireworks. He bought notebooks, labels, a file for Tyler, another for Gabe. The man who organized contracts now organized vulnerabilities with the same care. One night, he set a quiet phone reminder for 10 p.m., a single buzz in his pocket to ask Tyler, "What helped today?" It was the new ritual, a simple question, repeated in the cadence that builds home. Life outside the hospital demanded its pound. Late reports, a rearranged surgical schedule, patients who didn't want another doctor. The local news picked up the bus accident. Versions, counter-versions, interviews. The businessman father of the truck driver showed up in a story saying, "Schools should keep windows shut to avoid distracting children." Lauren turned off the TV immediately. "This isn't about distraction," she said. "It's about responsibility." Richard nodded with his head, and for the first time, with his heart. He saw that protecting his son would require more than moving resources. It would require moving language. When outside pressure finally pressed, it came as a block, like someone shoving a warped door until it gives. In the morning, Julia called an all-staff meeting. 2 items on the agenda: the formal complaint against Richard and a new accessibility directive to apply across departments, reduce noise when feasible, communicate clearly, pictograms available, mandatory training. The loud therapist spoke first. This will slow everything down. A tech shot back. Slow it or make it better. Another doctor raised a fair question. What about conflicts between what helps one patient and equipment protocols? Camille answered precisely. Brains differ, protocols adapt. Critical alarms stay, but most settings can be calibrated. There were sighs, eye rolls, and looks of support. Richard asked to speak. He didn't perform as a boss. He spoke as a defendant who understood the charge. I was wrong. I humiliated a boy. The warning is fair. I learned in days what I didn't learn in years. I'm asking that we turn this into procedure, not out of shame, but out of ethics. Silence, Julia wrote. It'll go in the minutes. That afternoon, reporters tried to enter the hospital, summoned by a post the businessman made to inflame the case. Security blocked them. Even so, one journalist managed to catch Lauren at the cafe door. Who do you blame for the accident? She pressed the friendship bracelet Tyler had made at school and said, I'm taking care of my son. Whoever needs to speak can do it in court. Her restraint supported the hospital's restraint. Still, the video of the question and her answer leaked and lit up the comments. Cold mom. After money. People use illness for everything. Richard doom-scrolled and felt his throat close. Lauren touched his phone and said, Don't feed the monster. He nodded and put it away. In the room, Tyler started trembling at a metallic scraping from next door. Gabe, sitting in the hallway with his mom, made a quick gesture, like zipping a zipper, and pointed toward the neighbor's door. Richard asked the team, Could we put felt pads on the legs of the bed next door? The scraping sound is ramping Tyler up. A tech answered, We don't have felt. Gabe unzipped his backpack and pulled out a piece of craft foam and a glue stick. Mrs. Rose smiled without apologizing for improvising. We learned this at school. In minutes, the fix was done and the metal scrape became a hush. Proof that a wafer of foam under a bed leg can change an afternoon. Richard breathed. He thanked the boy with his eyes. Gabe tilted his chin. A shared language was forming. By day's end, a lawyer for the businessman tried to access Tyler's chart to assess damages. Denied. He filed a notice threatening to sue the hospital for obstructing defense and demanded a statement clarifying that the school failed. Julia gathered leadership and drafted a crisp reply. Patient confidentiality is law. Any comment outside the case is unethical. Meanwhile, on the ward, a petty war brewed. The music-loving therapist kept playing low songs in the hall, defying the new quiet environment signs Camille posted. Richard approached him in private. Can I show you why that's a problem? The man crossed his arms. It's a problem for my routine. Richard swallowed anger and offered something he rarely did, listening. Show me your routine. We'll adjust without hurting it. The therapist disarmed a fraction. They set times. A small pact avoided a big war. Tyler's school sent a letter, surprisingly a warm one. The coordinator wrote, Tyler has always been sound sensitive and very dedicated when he finds a safe environment. You're welcome to come speak with the team anytime. In purple ink at the bottom, a teacher scribbled, he draws stadiums without the crowd noise. It's beautiful. Richard held the paper like he was holding a drawing of a childhood he'd almost missed. He thought of his own father, a factory man for whom the lathe's whine was music, and he understood. What is a rail for one person is an avalanche for another. The world doesn't have a single volume. In the middle of all that pressure, a practical relief. Tyler walked to the bathroom alone, steps unsteady, headphones hanging around his neck. Almost no one saw. Only Gabe, in the hallway, who tapped his cube twice, tick, tick, and gave a shy thumbs up. Richard returned the sign. The first solo walk went into the notebook. Date, time, controlled stimuli, partial success. Next to it, in less clinical handwriting, he added, gigantic pride. The fall came right when the curve finally seemed to climb. On a Friday night shift, the floor was understaffed, and an alarm was donating scares like a faulty faucet. Tyler's monitor glitched, first with offbeat beeps, then with a steady electronic whine. 90 seconds of that, and he spiraled into a crisis. Hands over ears, body arched, breathing fast. Richard lunged for the mute, but the button stuck. He asked for another monitor. It was in use. The room became a sound box. Lauren spoke softly, but her voice couldn't cut through. Gabe heard the noise, dropped his cube, and came in with Camille. Break! Headphones! The protocol started, but the storm had already built. A nervous new nurse came in with heavy steps and dropped a tray. The clatter cracked like a muffled gunshot. Tyler curled, bumped his head lightly on the rail. Richard held him, the father's hand finding the physician's function by instinct. "Son, breathe with me." But the world had climbed inside the boy. Shutdown was back, braided with panic. That's when Gabe did something no one expected. He stepped to the faulty monitor and, with precise movements, disconnected the secondary alarm channel, leaving only the visual readout. He'd learned by watching. The noise stopped. In seconds, the chaos dropped a notch. Camille looked at Richard. "We need a hard call. Move Tyler to the smaller room with fewer stimuli, but we'll break a unit rule because we don't have extra staff." The dilemma bit. Stay and risk another sensory crisis, or move and flirt with clinical risk. Not a thesis. His kid's body. Richard took 4 in, held 4, let 4 go. He looked at Lauren. "We move." She nodded. "We move." Camille went to get formal authorization. "Can't do it without it," said a supervisor glued to the rulebook. Julia arrived, assessed, signed the exception. "I'll take responsibility." And so, pushing a bed, unplugging monitors, carrying the post-it notebook like a map, they transferred Tyler to the smaller room where the lights could be tamed, the noise filtered, and visitors controlled. The change dented reputations. Next day, the music therapist filed a formal complaint. "Privileged patient." Someone else griped. They switched beds off schedule. Julia held the line. Protocols exist to serve people, not the other way around. Messages crisscrossed in group chats. A doctor joked, "We have pictograms even for coffee now." Someone replied with a photo of the quiet environment sign. Laughter emojis. Richard read it and felt his old persona itch to return, the one that cuts back. Instead, he pocketed his phone and walked to Tyler's room. He watched his son breathe, saw Gabe aligning the cube with the table corner, and with a small humility asked, "Will you teach me to line it up right?" Gabe guided his finger, a few millimeters left. "Like this." And with that, "like this," the world clicked. In the storm's midst, Lauren brought an old recording of Tyler from her phone, a 10-year-old voice saying, "Dad, when I grow up, I want to work where it's not too loud. When it's too loud, I get tired and no one sees." The audio was 2 years old. Richard listened with headphones, alone in the hall, and each word was a grain of sand under the eyelid. It was proof and an invitation. He'd have to choose from here on whether he would treat his son's sensitivity as an enemy or a compass. The choice settled like a dim light on the ceiling, always on, never blinding. In the end, the choice wasn't theoretical. He asked Julia to add to the hospital protocol not just pictograms and adjustable lighting, but a dedicated chart field, sensory preferences, with options for light, sound, touch, smells, temperature, and a space for family patient notes. "Just like we flag allergies, we flag what prevents overload," he argued. There was pushback and buy-in. Camille smiled inwardly. Gabe, unaware of the workflow, understood what mattered. When he showed his cube and cards, a grown-up changed the room. That's what kids notice when adults do the right thing. Not the text of a protocol, but the temperature of the air. Saturday, at the time that used to be game time, Richard brought a tennis ball in his bag. He placed it in Tyler's hand and softly coached, "Pass it hand to hand, slow." Tyler followed. The ball made a dry, steady sound, keeping pace with his breath. Gabe beside him echoed with his cube. Click, click, click. 2 rhythms, 1 room. Lauren leaned her head against the wall and closed her eyes. For a few minutes, 5, maybe 10, no one had to correct anything. Life fit together, like a cube's faces finally aligned. The most tense moment didn't pick a private stage. It came in broad light, with too many people. 3 days after the monitor night, the hospital held a short press conference, not about the accident, but to announce the new sensory accessibility directive after rumors turned to noise. Journalists showed up, mics in hand, tape marked off space in the lobby, and a simple sign read, "Quiet environment. Please speak softly." The irony wasn't lost on those who mocked pictograms. Julia took the mic. "Starting today, this hospital is adopting sensory accessibility measures across departments." She outlined the plan and cited the rationale. A reporter raised his hand. "Is this related to Dr. Miller's son?" Julia kept her gaze steady. "It's related to all patients who benefit from it," another insisted. "And you, Dr. Miller, who received a warning for disrespecting a patient with ASD. What do you have to say?" The lobby stiffened. Richard breathed and took the mic. No script. "I wronged Gabe. I was ironic when I should have been technical and human. I got a warning and I'm learning. My son's accident forced me to hear what I refused to hear. If this directive exists partly because of my mistake, all the better, because a mistake that becomes change spares others the same pain. A murmur rippled. The music therapist in the crowd looked down. Mrs. Rose from afar squeezed Gabe's hand. The businessman father of the truck driver crashed the event uninvited. He arrived with 2 lawyers and a plan: hijack the spotlight. He spoke loud, ignoring the sign. The school's to blame. My son hasn't slept since the crash, and now the hospital runs a quiet campaign while my family is being lynched online. Pain tangled with strategy. Julia held her tone. This isn't the forum. The case is under seal. He kept pushing, raising his voice, calling reporters over. Tension stretched. Lauren gripped Richard's arm. Don't bite. He nodded, but the man's words brushed Tyler, who was watching from a distance with his headphones around his neck. The boy began to fold in. Gabe saw it first. He touched Camille's arm and pointed, Tyler's shoulders lifting, hands shaking. Camille whispered to Julia, who signaled to wrap up. Reporters still wanted quotes. The businessman insisted, now claiming, doctors' kids get special treatment. A spark. The music therapist, maybe moved by guilt, spoke up. They don't. The room change was a clinical call under supervision. I objected and I was wrong. Public acknowledgement. 1 rock removed from the stream. Still, the moment needed a live resolution. Gabe, small as he was, ducked under the tape, set his cube on the floor, closed his eyes and turned the faces by ear. Yes, by ear, listening to the click of each turn. The sound was barely there, but those who held still heard it. He then lifted his pictogram card toward the businessman. Speak softly. The image froze the hall for a beat. The man, caught off guard, went quiet. Not out of obedience, out of embarrassment. Truth delivered as a gesture accomplishes more than arguments. Richard used the moment, not to humiliate, but to propose a deal with the room. If everyone can stay silent for 1 minute, we'll continue. If not, we'll end here. The lobby breathed together. Microphones lowered. Pens paused. For 60 seconds, someone cried without sound. Someone prayed without words. Someone rolled their eyes quietly. Tyler in the back relaxed his shoulders and leaned on Lauren. When the minute ended, there was no applause. There was commitment. A calmer reporter asked, "That bracelet there, doctor, what does it mean?" Richard raised his wrist with the low band. "It's a reminder, from me, to lower the volume before I raise my voice." A little laughter, the kind that doesn't wound. The businessman, realizing the stage wouldn't be his, left with his lawyers, tossing a final line to anyone who'd listen. "My son suffers too." Gabe watched him go with a look that didn't judge, only recorded, "Pain doesn't grant the right to hurt." Camille bookmarked the scene for training later. Sometimes the loudest person is the one who least knows how to ask. The press conference ended, but tension had one more swing. Back on the floor, Richard found a note folded into quarters and taped to the bulletin board. It was a printout of anonymous comments. "This doctor only changed because it happened to his kid." True, and it stung because it was true. Underneath, someone had handwritten, "And thank goodness he did." No signature. He took the note down and slid it into his pocket. Some truths belong close to the skin. That night, in the small room, Tyler picked up the cube for the first time. His hands, uncertain, were patient. Lauren and Richard watched without directing. Gabe, next to him, didn't interfere. Tyler turned one face, stopped, turned another, got mixed up, adjusted. The cube didn't close. He frowned and said in a thread of voice, "Almost." That was huge. Almost didn't exist in the vocabulary of a father who spoke only yes or no, right or wrong, success or failure. He repeated, "Almost, buddy. Tomorrow, more." The room light seemed lower than usual. Maybe by choice, maybe by mercy. Resolution didn't arrive with fireworks, but with routine, and with an echo from the start. On discharge morning, the hospital smelled like cleaner and burnt coffee. Tyler pulled on his favorite t-shirt, the one with no neck tag, and Richard set his headphones to a level that isn't silence, but is care. Camille handed over a color-coded envelope with the routine plan, contacts and the sensory preferences page, printed and laminated. "This travels with you." Gabe brought the cube, now with a small new sticker on one face, an ear pictogram with low. He gave it to Tyler. The boy touched the image and met his friend's eyes like recognizing a language. "Thank you," he said, clear enough to fill the room. Before leaving, Richard asked the team for 5 minutes. In a small meeting room, he spoke without slides. That day in the hallway I said communication doesn't save a leg. Today I know communication saves people, and it keeps us from losing the ones we love. Thank you for not letting me become only my worst version. No orchestrated applause, but there were wet eyes, even the music therapists. He asked to speak. I resisted, and I was wrong. I've removed the playlists from the hallway. Gentle laughter. Julia wrapped up. Note this. Training with Camille starts next week, and Richard will open it. Outside, Lauren walked with Tyler between the garden benches. The afternoon sun shone like a lamp without a shade, and yet the mood was calm. Richard took the pen he used to tap 3 times out of his pocket and put it back in his case for good. From today on, the ritual is different. He placed the brown envelope with the school report, the one he'd ignored for 8 months, in the first divider of the Tyler folder, next to the new sensory preferences form. An old wound turned into a clear lane. In the car, before turning the key, Richard breathed to 4. He checked the mirror and saw Tyler adjusting his seatbelt, aligning the buckle with the seat edge. Like this, he said. Like this, his father echoed with respect. Richard picked up his phone and, without starting the engine, recorded an audio that wasn't a convenient apology or a grand promise, but a commitment with proof. Gabe, this is Richard. Thank you for teaching me. If you want, we can make a simple booklet for other parents and professionals. With your drawings, your pictograms, I'll help with what I know and what I've learned. Are you in? Send. Minutes later, a photo came back. The room drawing with the low light. Now with a header Gabe had carefully lettered, Start Low. In the months that followed, life didn't turn into a movie with a triumphant score. There were bad days, new meltdowns, little setbacks. But there was a map, and there were hands. The booklet left the sketch stage. Start Low, a quick guide to welcoming sensory sensitivity, with Gabe's drawings and short text written by Camille and edited by Richard. The hospital adopted it, the school shared it, families printed it at home, hallway discoveries became pages, and pages became procedures. The cube took up space in Richard's office, not as a trophy, but as a concrete reminder of a doctor who nearly forgot what healing means. One Sunday, months later, in a small community gym, Tyler played again. There wasn't a loud crowd. There was a row of parents who'd learned to cheer with mittened hands. Before the opening whistle, a soft whistle pre-agreed, Richard touched his low bracelet and did the new ritual with his son. 4 in, hold 4, 4 out. Tyler smiled sideways. Gabe, in the bleachers with the cube on his lap, looked at the scoreboard, turned off and twisted the pieces for the pleasure of it, not urgency. When the game started, nobody shouted goal. Hands clapped slowly, like gentle rain on a roof. And still, the gym was full of something that isn't silence. Attention. On the drive home, Tyler asked, Dad, radio low. Richard slid the volume down until it nearly disappeared. An old song from his college days settled like a horizon, not a stormy sea. Lauren looked out the window and, in the glass, caught her face beside Tyler's and Richard's, 3 versions of a world that learned to negotiate with noise. The light turned red. Richard tapped the wheel 3 times out of habit. He stopped on the second tap, smiled to himself, opened his hand like letting go of a tool he no longer needed. At night, before sleep, he set 3 things on the bedside table: the low bracelet, Tyler's cube, and the Start Low booklet. He squared all 3 with the edge of the table, 1, 2, 3, and instead of laying down the pen on top, he set Gabe's original drawing with the word OK. The old ritual, which once enforced orders and deadlines, now sealed care and presence. The man who swore life never adjusts its volume eased the world down with his hands and discovered a heart hears better when it doesn't have to shout. Outside, someone could say the ending was happy and therefore unreal. It wasn't. The music therapist resigned months later. He couldn't adapt. The trucker's father lost his bid to blame the school and had to listen to the ruling with the same silence he'd mocked. Gabe still faced other ironies, because the world is still rough, but now he had allies with ID badges and callings. And Tyler keeps trying to solve the cube without hurry. Sometimes he finishes 4 faces, sometimes only 2. In all of them, his father repeats, almost is a path. On the first day back at school, Tyler used the side entrance, pre-arranged, crossed the yard without whistles, and climbed to a classroom with dimmer lights. The teacher greeted him with a smile that doesn't need volume. On his desk lay a pictogram card and a laminated copy of his sensory preferences. He ran his hand over it, slowly, feeling the plastic's texture. He looked at the window where the wind let the world say good morning without shouting. Life didn't demand entry. Life learned to knock. And at home on an ordinary night, Richard picked up his phone, opened the thread with his son, and listened again to the old audio. The one where a little voice said too much noise was tiring and no one noticed. When it ended, he recorded another. "I see." He didn't send it. He deleted it. He crossed the hallway, leaned on Tyler's doorframe, and said it in person, at the right volume. "I see." Tyler turned his face on the pillow and smiled with his eyes. There was no closing music, no final line, only the low hum of a world that finally fits inside a home.